What up guys, and welcome back to Thomas Reacts here on the 360 experience with myself, Thomas Mabaso. So guys, today I want us to look at President Cyril Ramaphosa. I want us to look at Phala Phala and South African Reserve Bank, because lately South African Reserve Bank have cleared President Cyril Ramaphosa of any wrongdoing there in Phala Phala. The South African Reserve Bank has found that there was no exchange control laws that were found in the reported transaction between President Cyril Ramaphosa and the Sudanese billionaire for buying 20 buffaloes. The South African Reserve Bank said that there was no exchange control laws that were violated there. The South African Reserve Bank went further to say that the money that was found at the president's farm, it is not the president's it is not the president's money, despite the fact that the president himself admitted that it was his money that was stolen there at the farm. And when he was questioned about where this money comes from, the president said that the money comes from a Sudanese billionaire, Hazim Mustafa, who happened to buy 20 buffaloes from his own farm. So the South African Revenue Service was questioned about this whole thing, and the South African Revenue Services agreed with the President Cyril Ramaphosa, saying that a tax compliance statement issued by South African Revenue Services indicates that the $4 million sale of the game at the President Cyril Ramaphosa Phala Phala farm in 2020 has been declared. A tax compliance statement issued by South African Revenue Services indicates that the $4 million sale of the game at President Cyril Ramaphosa's Phala Phala farm in 2020 has been declared. So guys, the South African Reserve Bank came and said that the money that was found at the president's farm, it was not the president's money, and they are clearing president of any wrongdoings. So guys, I have this interview that I want us to listen to, and I also have a reaction by ATM, African Transformation Movement, on this whole Phala Phala thing. So guys, I hope that you are going to stay with me, because I'm trying to figure out and I'm trying to simply understand what's actually happening here. Because if you remember, when the story broke, Arthur Fraser said that there was a burglary that took place at President Cyril Ramaphosa's farm. He went to lay charges against President Ramaphosa for not reporting the burglary that took place at his farm, because he said that there was a lot of money that was stolen there. But Arthur Fraser did not only stop there. He went as far as saying that he's laying charges against President Cyril Ramaphosa for kidnapping, for extortion, and for bribery, because according to him, these burglars were found and they were tortured, and at the end they were actually bribed not to say anything about what really happened there in Phala Phala. That's why Arthur Fraser went there to lay criminal charges against President Cyril Ramaphosa. President was questioned about this whole thing, and President Cyril Ramaphosa did not deny that there was a burglary that took place at his own farm, and there was a money that was stolen there. And when he was questioned about this money, President Cyril Ramaphosa said that the money comes from a Sudanese billionaire, Hazim Mustafa, who happened to buy 20 buffaloes from him. Even the South African Revenue Services was questioned about this whole thing, because people wanted to know how legal was this transaction. So the South African Revenue Services, on the 10th of March 2023, they've released a smaller statement saying that a tax compliance statement issued by South African Revenue Services indicates that the $4 million sale of the game at the President Cyril Ramaphosa's Phala Phala farm in 2020 has been declared. This is what the South African Revenue Services is saying. A tax compliance statement issued by South African Revenue Services indicates that the $4 million sale of the game at the President Cyril Ramaphosa's Phala Phala farm has been declared. So guys, I have two reaction videos to this South African Reserve Bank actually clearing President Cyril Ramaphosa of any wrongdoing. The first reaction that I'm going to take is from General Bantu Holomisa, and the second reaction that I'm going to take is from the spokesperson of the African Transformation Movement.
So if you've missed it, the Reserve Bank has cleared President Cyril Ramaphosa of any wrongdoing in regards to the Phala Phala scandal. They say they cannot conclude he did not flout foreign exchange control laws. But UDM leader Bantu Holomisa has always wanted the president to be prosecuted for not reporting the theft at his farm directly to the police. Mr. Holomisa joins me now live for reaction to the Reserve Bank's findings. Thank you very much, Mr. Holomisa, for your time here on EFM. ANC. Just firstly, with the fact that they only released this statement and then said they cannot release anything further because of certain laws, etc., maybe opening up to an application for the Promotion of Information Act.
And it's also raising questions, the fact that the South African Reserve Bank doesn't want to release the whole findings on the whole or on their investigations. It makes people question, man. It makes people question, if they want everything to be transparent, why don't they release everything? Now they want people to drag them to court to actually tell us what the president did at his farm.
Yeah, firstly, it's true. The United Democratic Movement rejects this report. In actual fact, we view it as nothing else but a whitewash on the same scale as that of the acting public protector, Ms. Talega. So we also question why the Reserve Bank would not find it unlawful for a person to keep currency beyond the required 30 days. Lastly, President Ramaphosa said his farm was beggared and about $500,000 was stolen. On the other hand, the Reserve Bank says this money did not belong to the president. Who's fooling who here?
Because when the Reserve Bank saying that there was no perfect transaction, like, it means that the money is not President Cyril Ramaphosa's money, because they also say that the buffaloes that were allegedly bought were not delivered. So what the hell is that money doing at the president's farm? Who is the owner of that money? The president said it's my money, but right now the South African Reserve Bank saying no, it is not your money. It is not your money because there was not perfected transaction between you and that billionaire you said that the money come from.
Really? So they mustn't think that we are stupid.
And I think that's what a lot of South Africans are asking themselves, that, in terms of transparency, why isn't the Reserve Bank showing us exactly what kind of information they gathered to come to this conclusion, etc.? So, Mr. Holomisa, is this where it ends? Are you thinking of going somewhere else, maybe the Hawks?
No, the Hawks, you won't get anything. I think the best would be to apply to get the documents and the information from Reserve Bank, because it's clear that the statement they have gathered, if it were to hit the public, maybe it would contradict what the Cyril has already said publicly. And but how true that even the Reserve Bank itself is now telling us that that money which found its way to his house, and nobody knows who owns it. That's a joke.
I think another part that I'm at least struggling with is just the question around the Reserve Bank saying in the statement that they cannot confirm that there was any illegal transaction. But then you ask yourself how it was recorded in his books if the transaction was not illegal or legal.
So if the Reserve Bank cannot conclude that there was no illegal transaction, how can they clear the president? How can they, in one hand, admit that, okay guys, we cannot conclude that there was no illegal transaction that took place here, but at the same time, how can they go out there and clear the president of any wrongdoing when they themselves cannot conclude that there was no illegal activity that took place here? How is it possible for the Reserve Bank to say those statements all at once? It makes no sense to me. Because if that money that was found at the president's farm is not the president's money, then who is the owner of that money? Who is the owner of that money? Because the president says that money comes from Hazim Mustafa, who bought 20 buffaloes from him, but the Reserve Bank said that the buffaloes were never delivered. If the buffaloes were never delivered, what the hell is that money doing at the president's farm? That is the big question. What the hell is that money doing at the president's farm? if those buffaloes were never delivered, like the Reserve Bank saying that there was no perfect transaction, then what the hell is that money doing at the president's farm? And how is it okay for the president to keep that amount of money for such a long time? And in foreign currency? Nah, come on, guys.
Etc.
No, I think whoever was conducting the investigation is an amateur. So all what they even failed to compare notes on what Cyril Ramaphosa had said publicly, what was revealed at the beginning, and what role Namibians had played. So it's a contradiction, and it's worse because the president said this was my money which was stolen. And I've asked the general to go and report this in the police. And then the Reserve Bank is still doubting that this money was belonged to the president.
Yeah, I think a lot of people obviously have a lot of questions. So for you, Mr. Holomisa, the UDM, are you saying that you're actually going to fill out forms and apply for the, access to information?
Yes, we are going to do that. And also, in the same vein, I think we need to look into this commission or Reserve Bank governors. These people, there are about 4 or 5 of them, but they take serious decisions which affects our economy, and now they are getting involved into politics. I think we need to look as to when can we change them and get other people who are interested in South Africa. Their priorities are elsewhere.
And just lastly, Mr. Holomisa, I mean, without sounding otherwise to you, because obviously you want something to be done about this particular case, there are those who would be saying, obviously those who are not detractors of the current president, who would be saying, look, everybody that opened a case and was investigating this particular case, including the Public Protector's Office, etc., has found that he didn't do anything wrong. So let sleeping dogs lie. What would be your response to that?
The whole thing is shady, man. The whole thing is shady. Even the way President Ramaphosa kicked out Bosiswe Mkhwebane to bring in Galeka, only for Galeka to clear Ramaphosa of any wrongdoing. Man, people like that thing, the whole thing is shady, man. The whole thing is shady. After Mkhwebane said that she's going to investigate what really took place there in Phala Phala, she was kicked out. And Galeka was brought in. And Galeka said that the president did nothing wrong. The whole Phala Phala scandal is shady, man. Well,
we cannot speak the same language in matters of this nature. But normally you would have expected institutions like South African Reserve Bank and Public Protector to be acting above board. But for them to say, for instance, they are withholding a certain information, that on its own discredits the whole exercise.
Seriously, guys. To me, this whole story is shady, man. This whole Phala Phala story is shady, man. It's shady because they report that there was a burglary that took place at the president's farm. The money was stolen. Allegedly, the burglars were found, they were kidnapped, and they were tortured, and they were essentially bribed not to say anything about the money. The president came out and he did not deny that there was a burglary that took place at his own farm, and he said the money that was found there, it was his own money, it was legal, because that money comes from a Sudanese billionaire, Hazim Mustafa, who happened to buy 20 buffaloes from him. The South African Revenue Services came and attested to that. You understand? Even right now, the South African Reserve Bank is coming out and saying that the money that was found at the president's farm, it is not the president's money, because there was not perfected transaction between the president and Hazim Mustafa. The Reserve Bank says they cannot conclude whether there was no illegal transactions that took place there. But at the same time, they are clearing President Cyril Ramaphosa of any wrongdoing there in Phala Phala.
by the spokesperson of the African Transformation Movement Party, that's Zama Nchona. Good afternoon, Zama. What is your reaction to this news from the Reserve Bank?
Yes, good afternoon to you, Braden, and the viewers.
Yeah, so what's the reaction of the African Transformation Movement?
Thank you so much. For us as the African Transformation Movement, this is a very bizarre finding. Very funny finding. One, you have an individual who goes on national television and he says, the money from my farm was mine, which means that the transaction was completed between him and the individual that was buying from him. Second to that, you have we have SARS, the South African Revenue Services, that says the transaction, the member of the close corporation, which was Mr. Ramaphosa, and the entity itself were tax compliant.
This is the statement that the spokesperson is talking about. A tax compliance statement issued by South African Revenue Services indicate that the $4 million sale of the game at President Cyril Ramaphosa's Phala Phala farm in 2020 has been declared. A tax compliance statement issued by South African Revenue Services indicates that the $4 million sale of the game at the President Cyril Ramaphosa Phala Phala has been declared.
Now, when you are going to say that the transaction was not perfected, what do you mean? Because you already have an individual who claims that the transaction was completed. You have an entity that already claims that there is compliance. Now, it does not make sense for us as the African Transformation Movement that this finding would be the case. The South African Reserve Bank truly must explain to us what happened. We regard them as some of the sharpest minds.
Because guys, what is the perfect transaction? Because what is the perfect transaction? If the money was found there and President said it's my money because this guy bought buffaloes for me, and even the South African Revenue Service said that money was tax compliant, isn't that a perfect transaction? What is the perfect transaction, guys? Please tell us, what is a perfect transaction?
We've got in the country, we regard them as some of the institutions that are able to do the work. What is it this time around that truly disturbed them, that they are able to clearly, you would think that this was a clear cut and dry story, and for some reason it seems as if that is not the case. They must tell us why.
So you as a transformation movement don't accept the Reserve Bank's findings?
No, there is no way. How do you truly look at the issue of how else can you explain the issue of foreign currency that is in my possession? Okay, let's just say we go with the argument that say the transaction was not perfected. So does it mean to me as a normal citizen, an ordinary citizen in this country, that I can keep large sums of money that are a foreign currency because I was not embarking on a process of selling and buying, and therefore that is okay?
Well, according to what I've seen, the bank says that there was no contravention of the exchange control regulations due to a tiny technicality, because that money was exchanged.
We all know that the date of the transaction, we all know that by the time the money was stolen, it had gone beyond the actual prescripts that we know about. So why wouldn't there be any?
Because by the time the money was stolen, the transaction had already happened. The transaction had already happened.
Violation does not make sense. So for us as the African Transformation Movement, we truly do not see how the Reserve Bank has actually gone. It's the only thing that they've managed to do. They have once again proven that the president is protected.
So you've said that you don't accept it, and you've got questions about how they came to this decision. What are you going to do?
The African Transformation Movement, we have to find, I understand what they are saying about they can't release the...
This whole thing of Phala Phala, it's very confusing, guys, but it is not confusing because I think it is straight up, man. The first thing that the president needs to tell us is that where the hell does that money come from? Because him saying the money comes from Hazim Mustafa, like, it does not stick anymore. It does not stick anymore because he said the money was from Hazim Mustafa for buying 20 buffaloes. But now the South African Reserve Bank said, even though it says the buffaloes that were allegedly bought were never even delivered. So where the hell does that money come from? And the South African Reserve Bank also need to say, how is it okay for the president to keep foreign exchange currency and such a lot of money at his property? How is it okay? These are the questions that people are really asking. So guys, please tell me what you think in the comment section. I may be wrong, I may be confused. Please hit that like button, and the most important part, guys, please subscribe. My name is Thomas Mabaso, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.